I don't think I love you no more. You never seem to call me lately, but I don't think she knew me at all.
Alright, today's video is going to be on Ryan Hillegas. I got a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right into this. The first thing I want to say is that just from me watching him, reading about him, I think it would be a safe statement to say that he strikes me as the jealous ex-boyfriend right off the bat. You know, Teresa, she's not with him any longer at this time. There is evidence of her sleeping with other men, being with other men, and he just strikes me as that type. So, some of the things I want to talk about first is the gaps in his call history, his activity on his cell phone. On October 31st, 2005, the day Teresa was killed, from 9:40 a.m. to 3:48 p.m., there was absolutely no activity on his phone. Then again from 3:50 to 6 p.m. So very likely at the time Teresa is getting killed, burned, mutilated, whatever, he has no activity on his phone. And then again after 6, around 7, he has activity, from 6 to 7. And then after 7, he doesn't have activity again until 1 o'clock the next day. A 17-hour gap in his phone activity. I guarantee I probably never had a 17-hour gap in my phone activity since smartphones have come out, and even before. Ever since I've had a cell phone, I've probably never had a 17-hour gap. Most of you haven't. Okay? And we know that Ryan Hillegas admitted on the stand that he guessed her password, accessed her cell phone records, trying to find out her whereabouts. And I think it's also very feasible, or believable rather, that he was the one that could have accessed her voicemail and deleted voicemails. Some other things was the claw marks on his hands, which I take to be fact because Zellner mentioned it in the petition, and the bruises. I'm not quite sure if those are bruises, but it definitely looks like he has black stuff all over his hands, ash or something. I'm not sure what it is, but it wouldn't make sense if it was ash, because at the time those pictures was taken of his hands was well after Teresa was supposedly murdered. Now, a big part of this video is going to be on this topic right here, and that is he was the unofficial leader of the search for Teresa Halbach. So to put this in perspective, he's the ex-boyfriend. He doesn't immediately disclose that to the police. He does later, but at first he just says he's a friend. Okay? So he's the unofficial leader of this whole search. So he has all these searchers, and he gives them all a map, and he sends them out looking under bridges, through fields, on side the roads, all over the place. But what's odd to me is, at this time, it is a known fact that the Averys was one of her last appointments on October 31st. As we all know, the last place somebody was supposed to be, or one of the last places, is where you would normally start looking for a person. To give you an example, if my wife said she was going to town, to Walmart or whatever, and she don't answer her phone for 5 or 6 hours, and I all of a sudden get worried and I don't know where she's at and I want to go look for her, the first place I would start would be the last place she told me she was going, which was Walmart. I wouldn't start going all over town, on the other side of town. You start at the last place they were known to be. So that doesn't make any sense and is highly suspicious. Now, here comes Pam Stern after most of all the searchers have left, and she says, has anybody searched Avery's salvage yard? He says no, and she's more than willing to go search, and he gives her, the only person he gave a camera and the sheriff's phone number to ahead of time. All the other searchers, all they got was this little map. But she's smart enough to know whether she's in on this whole thing or whether she just is innocent in this or whatever. She knows, that the best place to go look is the last place that she was thought to be. So she gets a camera and the sheriff's number, and she takes off to Avery salvage yard. So that's highly suspicious that Ryan is the leader of this search crew, but he doesn't send anybody to the Avery salvage yard. Nobody goes out there until Pam Stern comes up and wants to go search the yard. I believe Teresa's cousin, I forgot his first name, his last name Beach. I think they went out there momentarily and to a couple other salvage yards just to see maybe if her vehicle got towed, but nobody went out there and searched the property. Okay? It's highly suspicious. Another thing I thought was highly suspicious, during the month of October, Ryan and Teresa call each other, or he calls her a lot during that month. Like almost every day except like on Wednesdays for whatever reason. But every single Monday in October he calls her, except October the 31st. That's the only Monday in October that he didn't call her. Well, being that he wasn't asked to provide an alibi, and to my knowledge, we still don't know his whereabouts, I find it highly suspicious that he wouldn't call her on that day. Okay? And all these time gaps in his cell phone records on that day. What was he doing? Was he following her? Was he planning what he was going to be doing later that night? Why would his cell phone not have any activity? No ingoing, outgoing calls. Now, one thing, I don't know if, I'm assuming you'd have to have a court order, but Kathleen was able to access his cell phone records. I wonder if cell phone companies keep like cell site data, in 2005. I know they do now because I've watched hours and hours and hours of cell site data analyst in the Jessica Chambers case. I learned a whole bunch about cell site data, what towers you're pinging off of, stuff like that. I wonder if anybody has or will subpoena his cell site data, because to me that would clear him up. If he didn't do anything wrong, he should be coming forward with the information. Oh, I was doing this that day, I was here, I was doing, and my cell phone records prove it, or John Doe seen me, I was over there, or I was at my mom and dad's house all day. But to my knowledge, he hasn't even wanted to address where he was that day or what he was doing. But the fact that he's got a 17-hour gap is mind-blowing. even people that don't use their cell phones all day long, I find it hard to believe you have a 17-hour gap, especially at the time that Teresa is being killed. All of this is highly suspicious. On the stand, he was asked the last day you seen her, which was, I believe, Sunday. You went over there to give Scott something. She was sitting at the computer. Do you remember what time of day it was? And he said no. Okay, you don't remember the exact time. Well, was it day or night? I really don't remember. That makes absolutely no sense. Okay, this is a very important day. This is the last day you've seen Teresa Halbach. You can remember going over there. You can remember what you went over there for, which was to give Scott something. But you can't remember the drive there. You can't remember her sitting at the computer. You can't remember being in the house and her sitting at the computer and like maybe, I'm sure there was some windows around. You can't remember if it was dark or daylight. I mean, it'd be different if this, if this date wasn't the last time he seen her and they was asking him about something that happened 2 years before she was killed. This is a very important date that would have stuck in his mind. This is the last time I seen her. Oh yeah, I went to Scott's that day. I had to give him something and Teresa was there. You would know if it was at least daylight or nighttime. I thought that was a strange answer, and so did Stephen's attorneys. So, you got Teresa sleeping with these other guys. Ryan's the ex-boyfriend. Teresa says in an email that Ryan wants to get back with her. Makes me think he's a jealous ex-boyfriend. And I can't confirm, but there's also reports that she went to a party the night before. Ryan showed up, and she was with this other guy, and there was this big old fight. If that's the case, I wish there was some way to prove that, because that's all, that's all motive. That all, the investigation they would have to have investigated him if that, was fact. Now, another interesting thing I thought about, and a lot of these things I hear many a times is just sometimes they don't necessarily click right off the bat. But the parking light on Teresa's car, Ryan comes up with this story about how she made an insurance claim, got the money, and didn't fix it. She just kept the money. Well, Zellner contacts the insurance company, and lo and behold, she never made a claim about her parking light. Her parents are asked about it. They don't know nothing about it. The roommate's asked about it. He don't know anything about it. Nobody knows anything about this parking lot except Ryan Hillegas. Now really think about that. The car is found with a parking light, busted parking light in the back of the car, right? Ryan is the only one that says that, that has a story about the parking light. Nobody else tries to make up a story. Everybody else that's asked about it just says, I never heard of it. I didn't know she had a damaged light. But he comes up with this story that turns out to be a lie. He lies about the parking light. But in reality, he's the only one that knows anything about the parking light. And like Zellner said, that parking light is connected to this murder. And before I started really looking into this, and I'm not saying I think Ryan did it, but before I started looking into this, I kind of thought Ryan was one of the weaker suspects in this case. But after just that fact alone, that he's the only one that has any knowledge of any kind about that parking lot, that really gets me to thinking. Okay. Another thing, in one of my other videos, I talked about how far the driver's seat was back in the RAV. And I searched and searched and searched and searched to try to see if I could find how tall Ryan Hillegas is. I noticed in the interview video, him and Mike Halbach standing next to each other, they look close to the same height. The best I could do is come up with an estimate from photos. And I know for a fact he's taller than Stephen Avery. I know he's taller than Teresa. If I had to put a number on it, just guessing, looking at tons of photos of him on the internet, I would put him at about 5'10". 5'9" to 5'11", in that range. I'm going to call it 5'10". So we're talking, Teresa was 5'6", so he's 4 to 5 inches taller than her. And Avery is 5'5". He's actually an inch shorter than Teresa. So 6 to 7 inches taller than Stephen. So if you've watched that previous video I made about the driver's seat of the RAV, and if that seat wasn't moved from the time it was found to the time it went to the crime lab, it looks like it would fit a 5'10" person a lot better than would it fit a 5'6" or a 5'5" person to drive that vehicle comfortably. So I thought that was interesting as I was going through a lot of this. Another thing I thought about was, if, let's say, we do want to theorize and say that Ryan is the murderer, okay, some things would be a lot better explainable. For instance, why would Ryan even, let's say he was the murderer, why did he interject himself into this whole investigation, this whole search party thing, right? One of the things I've noticed out of all the crime documentaries I've watched, watched tons of Forensic Files, all the Snap, I mean, everything. A lot of times when people are murdered, 99% of the time is somebody they know, somebody close to them. But not only that, when all of the crime documentaries I've watched on serial killers, and I'm not calling Ryan a serial killer, but in killers in general, let's just say that, typically they like to revisit the scene, and they like to revisit the things that they do, and typically, in a lot of cases I've noticed, they like to interject themselves into the investigation. That way, whether it's to mislead or to taunt or whatever, they get a kick out of it. It's like it's like a high to them, right? I thought, that's kind of my own personal theory. If he was the murderer, like, why would he interject himself into all of these things, the search party and all this? Well, he knows where the car is at. He knows everything about everything if he murdered her, and now he gets to revisit all this. It also explained why he wouldn't want to immediately lead the search party to, the salvage yard. He would kind of want that to, be not the first option like it should have been. Okay, because that would have been, in his mind, I'm sure, well, that's going to make me look suspicious, so let's go search all these other areas first, and then we'll go to the salvage yard. Another thing I thought about, well, let's say he isn't the killer, and the reason why he had everybody searching like near Green Bay and all of these other places is because maybe he knew, or somebody knew, that she left the Avery property and was coming back towards the area they were searching. So maybe that's why they started there. Maybe they didn't even think, that the last place she was alive was at the Averys. Maybe they thought she, had came back towards where they were searching at, and that's why they started there. Both cases are interesting. You know, whatever scenario you like, they're both interesting. And I have tons more stuff wrote down. I might have to do a part 2 on this video because this video is already 20 minutes long and I haven't even really got started on this. So I'm going to leave it right there, and I'll probably make a part 2 of this video. But like, share, subscribe to my channel, and leave me any thoughts that you have in the comments section. And y'all have a rest of your night. Y'all have a good one.